Once again, about to go to the gym, but this is important to talk about, so let's talk about it. Yesterday was actually an off-year election for a number of really important initiatives, as well as key positions that could affect the 2024 election and beyond. It kind of snuck up on a lot of people because, believe it or not, we've been talking about a lot of these things for about a year or so now, and this entire month and a half or so has been dominated by information coming out of the Middle East, or the actor strike, or a bunch of other major bombshells just coming in. And to set you up before I read the results, let me tell you where we were like a day or so before the election happened. There had been a number of polls that have come out that had started to sound the alarm on Biden's age and the way voters felt about it. And the NYT Sienna poll, one of the gold standard polls that's kind of manned over by Nate Cohn, he's the guy who does the fucking needle every year, ended up publishing a poll that showed Biden behind in a number of key swing states against Donald Trump. Now, this poll had a lot of information. It was very, very comprehensive, and the message was clear. Hey, people do not like their choices. A lot of people were concerned about Biden's age. One key statistic to look at is how Trump fared against a litany of candidates. So for Joe Biden, Joe was up by 2 in the Sienna poll in 2020, and now Trump is up by 5 in the poll. If you named a specific alternative in 2020, like Elizabeth Warren, Republicans were up by 2, but today they'd be up by 3. However, if you just said a generic Democrat against Trump, in 2020, Democrats were up by 3, and in 2023, Democrats were up by 8. Again, Trump was still deeply unpopular, but it feels like there are a lot of concerns about Biden's electability. This is leading in to this special election. And there are a lot of close races to look at with some really important stuff on the ballot. It was a low turnout year, and a couple days before, people started to have a couple nerves like, oh shit, there's going to be an election. Well, turns out, in spite of a political environment you would think would be far more GOP-based, Democrats ended up making a lot of major gains in a lot of these contests. And I really think it's important to go through and analyze what just happened and how that's going to affect 2024. So let's start with Ohio. In Ohio, issue 1 was the main thing everybody was talking about. There's been an effort since Roe v. Wade was overturned to try to enshrine abortion rights into the Constitution, the state constitution of Ohio. Now, this has faced a lot of pushback and tactics by Republican officials. Voter rolls were purged very, very close to the election. There was a vote on issue 1, and you had to vote no on issue 1 so it could stay on the ballot. And then now you have to vote yes in order for it to pass. And all of these were deliberately designed to make it confusing for voters to be able to enshrine abortion rights there. It was deliberately done. So it was nerve-wracking for a lot of people. Like, hey, is this actually going to be able to pass? And lo and behold, issue 1 passed 56.6% to 43.4%. And honestly, that's kind of the story of this whole election. Democrats who ran on abortion issues tended to win their races more outright. For example, Glenn Youngkin, the governor of Virginia, is generally seen as this GOP rising star, right? He has made it very clear that he does want to issue an abortion ban at 15 weeks. He's generally been blocked by his state legislature in Virginia. A lot of people felt that, like, hey, he's maybe going to turn Virginia red. His victory was like a big fucking deal. Well, as of last night, Democrats not only maintained control of the state Senate, they actually flipped the state House as well, taking over the entire Virginia General Assembly. This was a major defeat for Glenn Youngkin, somebody who people were saying like, hey, if he's not going to run in 2024, he may run in 2028. And that's not all. In Pennsylvania, Daniel McCaffrey, who ran for the open seat on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, running on mainly abortion rights, won his election. This is really, really important. As you know, Pennsylvania is a swing state, and any challenges to democracy are going to have to face a 5-2 Democratic majority. If Daniel would have lost, it would have flipped control to the GOP, and depending on what happens in 2024, Trump could cause another difficult crisis if he lost. But again, there's a lot of evidence that this is because of the fight for abortion. That is a key issue with a lot of voters who aren't just Democratic. And you can see it in the other results that weren't so good for Democrats as well. Elvis Presley's cousin, that's true, it's real. In Mississippi, Brandon Presley, who is Elvis Presley's cousin, ran against incumbent Governor Tate Reeves. And actually, it was seeming like it was actually a pretty close contest. Brandon had made some significant inroads and was an unusually strong candidate in deep red Mississippi. But a key difference between Brandon and other Democrats this year, despite being an unusually strong candidate, was he wasn't very pro-choice. He actually was also anti-abortion. And guess what? He lost his race. It was close, but he lost his race. And again, multiple other places where abortion was not the key issue, Democrats had a lot harder of a time. Also, materially important, places where woke culture and transgender rights were a key issue where people were like, hey,
transgenders are gonna fucking turn the frogs gay and come after you.
Those Republican candidates underperformed. Andy Beshear faced Daniel Cameron in Kentucky. Daniel Cameron, the former AG of Kentucky, who obviously said Breonna Taylor's killing was justified. Fucking idiot. Well, with his brilliant morality, he lost in the deepest red state he could have. Fuck you, bro. And good. Also in Ohio, I forgot to mention, issue 2 also passed for legalizing marijuana. These are really positive results going into an election year like 2024. Now listen, they're not entirely predictive. They're still a year out. But it shows that the environment is not an anti-progressive norms and democratic norms environment. People are genuinely upset that Roe v. Wade was overturned. It's clearly, at this point, an unpopular decision since Dobbs came through. And you are seeing it all across the ballot since 2022. 2022, which was supposed to be a red wave, was not. It was like a trickle. The fact that Democrats gained a seat in the Senate and held the GOP at 9 seats in the House is a pretty big fucking deal. It's also clear, and this is something that I've read from Nate Silver. I know a lot of people don't like Nate Silver, but he does have some points from time to time. Trump is a liability right now to the GOP in multiple ways. Number one, there's no GOP ballot that is strong without him on it. Every time Trump has not been on the ballot in the contest and there's somebody he's endorsed or something around him, that candidate has tended to underperform compared to their other numbers. When he is on the ballot, 1 year the GOP did really, really well. Since then, they tend to have mediocre results. He is still a deeply unpopular candidate, and it's pretty clear what the electorate is trying to tell you. People plugged their nose and voted for Joe Biden. Biden has done a few popular things amongst both progressives and the rest of the left, objectively, if you look at it. But that being said, there are a lot of unpopular things that he's done, and he's gotten dinged on a lot of promises that he's been unable to keep. Student loan forgiveness. Now, look, if you look at that, that's not necessarily his fault because of the way the Supreme Court acted and because of the way he's been trying to get that through still. But even the plan that he had wasn't far-reaching enough for a lot of progressive activists. And his stance in Israel hasn't really been helpful to anybody there. A lot of his positions have not been met by overwhelming support because of a lot of the fractures in this current era. So Biden has some issues. Now, it's a little late for a late challenge, like a Ted Kennedy of this thing. In fact, a lot of people don't know if a challenger could beat Biden in a lot of the states in a Democratic primary right now. But the other thing a lot of Democratic strategists are talking about is like, hey, we've kind of been fucking up, which is a good thing to realize, because a lot of them are saying like, when's the last time we talked about abortion? When's the last time we did this? When's the last time we did this? And listen, I am distrustful of like pretty much all politicians in general, but results like this would show like, hey, you're the problem. It's you. Make people who are smart at politics realign themselves and figure their shit out. And look, we can't discount the mobilization of a lot of these people who knew these issues were important. A lot of current elections and special elections rely on people being ignorant or feeling that the system doesn't work or there's no way to make inroads. There are significant inroads made here that are going to defend democratic institutions and defend rights for women. This shit is important. And there was a very real chance that this year, especially with all that's going on in the way the media cycle is, that people would have ignored it. And you could have had a world where issue 1 didn't pass and there was a ban on abortion in Ohio. You could have had a world where Glenn Youngkin had a trifecta and all of a sudden curbed rights for women in his state. And now you have the opposite. You have the guy who justified Breonna Taylor's killing out on his fucking ass. All of these are important initiatives. It's very clear what the messaging is, and it's clear what Democrats have to do. If they're going to go with Joe Biden needs to make some significant pivots and start kind of waking the fuck up. I mean, every candidate needs that a little bit. If you remember in the Obama's re-election campaign, that first fucking debate wasn't great. So either figure your shit out, find another challenger, and find candidates who can actually make inroads instead of doing weird censures to fucking postulate. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to link to a couple places for election results. But overall, a pretty strong night for Democrats. Anyway, my name is Zaid, and I'll see y'all soon. Let's go!